Good morning, everyone, for our second session at the 8th Annual New Jersey Watershed Conference. Today, this session is the role of stormwater retrofits in climate change, or in a changing climate, sorry. I want to thank all of our sponsors. Your support has made this conference possible. Housekeeping, this is obviously a virtual session. If you can't hear us, make sure your stream is enabled in Zoom. We will be taking our questions in the question and answer portion. Do not use chat. And if you have any issues, reach out to us at conference@thewatershed.org. We will be offering 1.25 PE credits. We have applied for CFM credits, waiting to hear. The forms are in the document section of Zoom events, so please fill those out and submit those. All right. So our speakers today is Chris Attiro, a Policy and Program Coordinator of New Jersey Future, Dr. Clay Emerson, PhD, PE, CFM, Senior Technical Director at Princeton Hydro, and Aaron Bennett, Proposal and Marketing Manager at Princeton Hydro. All right. And with that, I will turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Mike. Just gonna share my screen. All right. So thank you for coming. Very happy to be here. This is the role of stormwater retrofits in a changing climate. My name is Chris Attiro. As Mike said, I am a policy and program coordinator at New Jersey Future's mainstreaming green infrastructure program. So in New Jersey, we have a lot of outdated and underperforming stormwater management tools that simply cannot keep up with our changing climate and need to be retrofitted. So I'm going to get into the challenges that New Jersey is facing today, as well as a resource that we helped develop with Princeton Hydro to assist in stormwater retrofit best management practices. So, got a little animation there. Founded in 1987, New Jersey Future is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that promotes sensible growth, redevelopment, and infrastructure investments to foster vibrant cities and towns, protect natural lands and waterways, enhance transportation choices, provide access to safe, affordable, and aging-friendly neighborhoods, and fuel a strong economy. This organization achieves that through original research, innovative policy development, coalition building, advocacy, and hands-on strategic assistance. New Jersey Future's mainstreaming green infrastructure program works to advance green stormwater infrastructure practices throughout the state. Overdevelopment and traditional outdated gray infrastructure have not only made it increasingly difficult to manage the volume of stormwater, but they're also degrading the source water quality. We need to be encouraging nature-based solutions to effectively and sustainably manage stormwater while also delivering societal and economic benefits. So, what is green infrastructure? This is the EPA definition. I would hope it's still on the webpage, but who knows these days. Green stormwater infrastructure uses filtration, infiltration, and evapotranspiration to treat and soak up rainwater where it falls. It can deliver multiple environmental, social, and economic benefits beyond just stormwater management alone. More broadly, nature-based solutions as a collective try to use or mimic natural processes to enhance water availability, improve water quality, and reduce risks associated with water-related damages, disasters, and climate change. Green infrastructure can absorb, capture, and store stormwater in a decentralized manner throughout a municipality or watershed to alleviate concerns from excessive runoff that carry non-point source pollutants into freshwater bodies. So things like fertilizers, pesticides, oil and grease from cars, sediment, microplastics from tires, nitrogen, phosphorus. And when these types of pollutants enter local lakes and act as nutrients for bacteria, that's how harmful algal blooms form and degrade source water quality. And just last summer, New Jersey's uh, beautiful Round Valley Reservoir was closed for recreation from swimming for pretty much most of last summer because of harmful algal blooms. So we really need to be doing more to manage stormwater throughout the state. So here are some examples of green infrastructure. We've got rain gardens, permeable pavement, green roofs, which are the sexiest of green infrastructure, uh, cisterns or rain barrels, green streets. So aside from just stormwater management benefits, there's also massive benefits to speak about aesthetic improvements. They can raise property values in your area. And there's also a whole other conversation about reducing the urban heat island effect by cooling your municipality and local area. So stormwater is a growing problem. Our state and larger region in the Northeast has been experiencing heavier and more frequent rainfall. As we continue to develop, we have more pavement, more impervious surfaces, which leads to more stormwater, more frequent flash flooding, and also leads to other end results such as street closings, property damages, sewer overflows in some more urban areas of New Jersey where we have combined sewer systems that can uh, literally leak raw sewage into the streets during high rainfall events, damage infrastructure, and impaired waterways as well. In New Jersey, over 90% of our waterways are still considered impaired, and that's no coincidence. We are the most densely populated state, and with that comes pretty extensive development. So every time a Walmart or a neighborhood goes up with parking lots and roads the size of football fields, all of that impervious surface cover is inhibiting the land's ability to absorb rainwater into the soil. So when enough of that development occurs, combined with rising precipitation patterns caused by anthropogenic climate change, you're left with some very serious problems. So over 500,000 households in New Jersey are at serious risk of flooding, which equates to 1.2 million residents, according to the Federal Reserve Bank. We also are experiencing anywhere from 4 to 11% yearly increase in precipitation rates across the state, which will continue through 2050. Freshwater wildlife populations have also fallen by 85% since 1970 from monitored populations. In my previous role as a New Jersey watershed ambassador, that was one of the main things that I did was monitor freshwater streams for these tiny, tiny aquatic insects, macroinvertebrates, no larger than the size of a paperclip, that are, just the lowest foundation of life in a lot of these ecosystems, and they are drastically being reduced. So if there's no macroinvertebrates, then there's no fish, then there's no birds to feed off of, and it just affects the entire ecosystem. So we really need to be doing a better job at this. So this poll was conducted by the Green Infrastructure Leadership Exchange to determine the strongest drivers behind public green infrastructure investments. And as you can see, by far the most compelling driver among respondents was water quality regulatory requirements, such as NPDES or National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits and MS4 permits. So despite the laundry list of benefits that come with green infrastructure, we know that investments simply are not made unless there is a requirement to do so. So stormwater management has been consistently changing throughout the state. Land use and stormwater management has gradually changed over time as the state has developed. The natural hydrology of our watersheds has altered. The process of infiltration is reduced when we replace natural features like wetlands and meadows and forests with large areas of impervious surfaces. So this leads to problems like pollution of our waterways, increased flooding, and reduced groundwater, which can produce droughts like the one we saw for most of last fall into the winter. The state's stormwater management rules are also administered by the NJDEP. These rules require new developments of a certain size to manage stormwater, and they were introduced in 1983. When this happened, they had very little consideration for water quality or groundwater recharge, and really didn't gain much teeth until 2004. So, as you can imagine, all of the development that occurred in this state prior to 2004 has pretty inadequate or even non-existent stormwater management systems. So these rules were revised in 2020 to require all applicable projects to implement green stormwater infrastructure, which is a big win. And the rules were revised again in 2023 to require that the latest climate science is used when designing new systems. This was the Inland Flood Protection Rule as part of the NJ Pact updates. That stands for protecting against climate threats. And the second phase of that initiative is the NJ Pact Real Updates, which stands for Resilient Environments and Landscapes, which are pending in the state register and expected to be adopted in the fall or late summer. So moving on, stormwater management is also required through the state's MS4 permit or municipal separate storm sewer system permit, excuse me. That permit has requirements for all municipalities in the state to administer a stormwater management program to manage pollutants entering our waterways. This permit is revised every 5 years, with the latest update coming in 2023. Some very significant changes have been made in this cycle, such as all municipalities must map their existing stormwater infrastructure, and before the end of the 5-year permit cycle, they are required to identify projects to implement that can improve water quality and reduce flooding, which are referred to as watershed improvement plans. So by the end of the 5-year permit cycle, every town in New Jersey must have these plans developed and identify projects that can be either built from the ground up or retrofitted with green infrastructure best management practices. So all this to say, what you have now in the Garden State is a situation where we are highly built out, highly developed. Some might even say overdeveloped. And a lot of that development occurred prior to 2004, prior to 2020, prior to 2023. And therefore, we have a lot of opportunities for retrofits. So there's a lot to take in, lots of rules, lots of regulations. And I know you must be thinking, man, I wish there was an organization, possibly two organizations, that took the time and care to put together a resource that provides municipalities, counties, nonprofit organizations, developers, and even individual property owners with the tools to identify opportunities for retrofitting these outdated stormwater infrastructure systems and to comply with all of these new pesky regulations. That is why we partnered with Princeton Hydro, a water resources and engineering firm, to create the Stormwater Retrofit Best Management Practices Guide. This guidance document provides best practices for retrofitting stormwater infrastructure to improve functionality. It includes natural features such as green infrastructure and also provides some very helpful case studies of successful projects right here in New Jersey. A stormwater retrofit essentially aims to modify the existing drainage systems to further improve stormwater control and treatment practices. This can include improving or enhancing the function of older, poorly designed, poorly maintained stormwater management systems. Retrofits can also reduce volume, filter out pollutants, increase groundwater recharge, and help mimic pre-development hydrology. So, thinking about these systems as a whole is very critical when implementing retrofits, and in some cases, thinking outside of the box for what defines a retrofit. So, things such as floodplain reconnection or stream restoration may be the best option for the community or the environment or the specific site. So, the ideal stormwater retrofit will control peak rate, uh, which means runoff volume, and treat water quality among a whole host of other benefits. So this guide was the whole idea behind this guide was to help municipalities comply with the new MS4 permit requirements because there are all of these new requirements to implement watershed improvement plans and identify new projects. So that does not just mean, looking for new areas, that can also mean retrofitting existing outdated stormwater management systems. So here is a QR code that you can scan on your phone. There's a PDF copy available online for free. You can print it out, you can put it on your nightstand, you can give one to your kids. Doesn't matter if they it doesn't matter if they can't read yet. There's a lot of fun pictures. My colleague, Dr. Emerson from Princeton Hydro, is going to get a little bit more into the specifics of the retrofit guide. But anyway, my name is Chris Satiro. My contact information is here. Please feel free to reach out to us if you are interested in learning more or want to, have some copies of the guide for yourself. So that concludes my section of the presentation, and I'm going to hand it over to Clay.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that excellent introduction, and some real critical background on what I'm going to talk about here for the next few minutes. So thanks, first of all, for to the Watershed Institute for putting this together and for having us. And it was a pleasure to work with New Jersey Future on this guide. And so what I'm going to do in the next few minutes here is talk about a little bit of the specifics of the guide, but I'm going to kind of walk you through the concept of stormwater retrofits, and then I'll pass it to Aaron to talk about some of the partnerships and things that go into a successful retrofit project in many cases. I do encourage, as Chris did, he did a better job than I could, to encourage you to check out the guide. I think there's a lot of useful information in there. Here's just a quick screenshot of what it looks like and some of the questions that we were trying to answer. Now, it is a guide. It's not a manual, so it's not a step one, do this, step two, do that. And frankly, the whole idea of stormwater retrofits is not a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach. But I think you'll find the guide useful. And again, what I'm going to do is go through it, talk about some of the basic premises of stormwater retrofits. And I have a number of examples kind of sprinkled throughout, both, before and after photos and things like that, little lessons learned and things like that. So hopefully it'll be a little bit of something for everyone here. But yeah, the who, what, why, and how anyway. As he already mentioned, some of the target audiences, NGOs, local, county government, but especially municipalities who are looking at those watershed improvement plans in that 5-year horizon, and looking on where they can get started. So it is a guidance document. The purpose here, there's a huge need for this. Everything that Chris just said about the regulations changing in the relatively recent past, the status of development throughout New Jersey, and a key I think misunderstanding is that all those stormwater regulations, pretty much until this point, the goal of those regulations has been historically, you know, develop your site, but don't make anything worse. And never in those regulations is there really has there been a purpose to make anything better. And that's just, that's the history of land development in New Jersey. But retrofits give you an opportunity to improve functionality of systems that were designed um, with different performance metrics, no performance metrics, or for the majority perhaps of development in the state where there were no regulations whatsoever. Um, so a little bit about what a retrofit is, why do we do this, where to look for them, for project siting, and a little bit of how. And one thing that we talked about early on in this process was, um, the word retrofit kind of implies taking something and changing it into something else, and we the guide kind of expands on that definition, and so we're not just taking an existing stormwater feature and improving its functionality. In many cases, we're adding a new structure into the built landscape. So retrofitting green infrastructure into um, the existing built landscape. So a little bit broader definition. So, so when I say existing system here, I don't mean necessarily an existing stormwater detention basin. Obviously, I'm going to talk about that. That's a great retrofit. But it can be a lot more than that. Um, the classic engineering kind of concept is, well, you got a pipe that takes runoff perhaps into this lake. And everyone who lives on this lake, their property value is innately tied into the water quality of this particular lake. Let's be engineers and cut the pipe and drop a big precast chunk of concrete with some filters in it and fix that problem. And yes, that's a stormwater retrofit. And yes, those things work, and especially in lakes where you might have a few, sometimes very few, stormwater outfalls. Things like this can really be beneficial as well. But the more modern green infrastructure approach, taking naturalized systems and bringing them into engineered places like stormwater management basins, existing basins, is another one. But I think, and the manual talks about this, I think my definition of green infrastructure goes a little bit beyond a rain garden. What about, to use an example in our built landscape, what about say you have a 400 or 500 acre drainage area, all of which was developed with no stormwater controls? What about taking an existing impacted floodplain or wetland and adding, some light engineering touches to try and not just improve the already impacted wetland that's been impacted from, decades of uncontrolled stormwater runoff, but trying to kind of restore, to a certain extent, the hydrology and the people who deal with that altered hydrology downstream by, for example, expanding the floodplain, in these areas and doing some other things. So a stormwater retrofit may not just look like the box. It may not just be a naturalized stormwater basin. I think some of the best ones, the most functional ones, the most resilient ones, the ones with some of the most ancillary benefits are those that really just look like a natural system. So the manual, I've got some screenshots of things from the guide. I just called it a manual. Um, and we do focus on some specific things. And again, it's written to guide you through the concept and not be overly prescriptive. Yes, there's some uh, kind of a matrix of, what is your target, what type of systems should you be looking for, and what's a relative cost, but there really is no one size fits all. What is good though is that retrofit approaches are flexible and can be implemented to fit nearly all applications. I mean, we're working in the built environment, and I'll have some slides like this. And there's no doubt that between property ownership, um, functional site concerns, existing infrastructure, there are, I don't want to call them limitations, but you got to work within, um, you know, within the hand that you've been dealt. And sometimes that is um, difficult, but there's a lot of different approaches, and usually you can get something to fit in. And because of what, you know, as Chris outlined, there's usually no shortage of sites. There's a lot of unmanaged, uncontrolled, impervious cover in New Jersey, and so you usually have sites to choose from. Um, so this bullet point list, I know we have a number of different people from a number of different sectors probably listening this morning. And so when I ordered this list of bullet points, I kind of said, what's the most common reason for a retrofit? And hearing the summary of the watershed improvement plans that's going to address both water quality and flood reduction um, goals, I did put those at the top, but retrofits get done for a variety of reasons. And in my experience, they include all six of these points. And sometimes, depending on what your site is or what your goals are, perhaps demonstration or education is your number one goal, and whatever water quality benefits you get are great, but that's not your purpose. Maybe you're just looking for that ecological uplift or aesthetic improvements, things like that. So there's plenty of reasons to do it, but what your target is going to dictate, certainly is going to dictate your approach. So I've already mentioned this a couple times. Um, Stormwater basin retrofits or naturalization um, is often, quote, the low-hanging fruit of stormwater retrofits, and for many good reasons. As Chris outlined, again, a lot of places, a lot of the developed landscape has no stormwater control. And even if these sites were redeveloped within relatively recent history, they may also have essentially no um, uh, identifiable stormwater system, a standard dry detention basin that you're used to seeing. They may have nothing, even if they were, again, redeveloped, um, in the last 20 years. And the majority of these basins were designed for peak flow control only. Um, but they are simply the easiest of stormwater retrofits. And I don't mean just easy in terms of implementation, but the most effective, most productive, most efficient. Um, and, why is that? I mean, the old joke, why do people rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Well, similar thing here with stormwater detention basins, because you already have this efficient system of pipes that take all your directly connected impervious cover, which is what's disproportionately generating most of the runoff, and they bring it to one place. And in this one place, assuming it's an above ground basin, not the underground basins that are more recent um, feature in our built landscape. But typically these areas have less utility conflicts that develop. And there's some other reasons that these are good examples. And here's one that was originally not a naturalized system and allowed to naturalize. And it's not perfect. And I'm sure there's someone in the audience this morning that's looking at the foreground there and saying, oh, there's mugwort there. And yes, there is mugwort, and there's probably some other invasive species here. But from a hydrologic standpoint, from a water quality standpoint, this system is functioning far better than it was when it was originally designed. And actually, the previous, if you were able to listen on the previous talk, a lot of their discussion about soil aggregation and organic matter and soil health in general has a lot to do with a successful uh, dry detention naturalization. And, our impacts aren't the conventional tillage that they referred to. They're what the damage that was done during construction, whether it's compaction from the rubber tire equipment there, or just the fact that these are usually excavations that have taken the soil, the topsoil, the more highly organic component of the soil, and done away with it completely because you have a 4-foot hole in the ground down below, into the B and C soil horizon. So a lot of good discussion there that is relevant here. So the retrofits in New Jersey, hey, what's not to like? Plenty of bad examples of detention basins to pick on. These are two that I've picked on before, but you can drive around and see for yourself the vast array of stormwater detention basins that we have that really, I said these things are not really designed at all for anything other than peak flow control, and I think these photos speak to that. All right, so what makes a good candidate? Here's a slide, an excellent candidate for a couple quick reasons. You see the concrete low flow channels. You see that even the turf grass is still having trouble, providing full coverage. Obviously, it's a dreary winter photo, but you can see some evidence of that. What you don't see in this photo is homes, right? This is kind of out of view to a certain extent. You see a road in the background. So, this is screaming, mid 80s construction here in New Jersey, and one that would make an excellent candidate. Room for improvement. In any kind of retrofit scenario, and maybe a little less so for just a naturalization approach, but you must respect or improve on the original design function and hydraulic performance of the system. And that entails doing some calculations and ensuring that you're at least providing what this was required to provide originally. And that it may just entail minor changes to the operation and maintenance, assuming some of that is happening to begin with. Key point here, the third bullet point, who are your neighbors? So there's, I think, 150 homes in this particular development. I've kind of cropped it here in the photo. And 145 of them don't even know that there's a stormwater basin back here. But 4 of them think that it's their personal backyard. So knowing your neighbors, having a champion, and that communication that Aaron will talk about is truly truly important. It must fit the opportunity. Another one retrofit that just some very minor grading and some soil improvements to undo that damage during construction got this basin. They were already getting complaints from the township on their basin, and a simple naturalization there with some very minor grading and outlet structure modifications more than fixed their problem. So it could just be minor things like that, or it could really be, let's start from scratch here. This basin isn't what we wanted, perhaps in this case from an aesthetic or an ecological value. Let's totally destroy the thing, like haul out the outlet structure, bring in a new one, totally regrade the site. And these are before, or I should say during and after photos of one of those retrofits. So it really can be anything in between. Again, kind of looking on the simpler side of things, excellent application that Craig McGee down at Camden and Gloucester County Soil Conservation District, who was one of the stakeholders in this process, excellent group of people that we rounded up with the help of New Jersey Future, provided input, provided example projects. But this is one where just grass swales, turf grass swales, and turf grass basins were seeded in kind of a one-day effort, minimal equipment minimal hours, and really provided a functional system there. Wet ponds are fair game for retrofit as well. Unfortunately, they serve as nutrient sources quite often from mowed edges and Canada geese that they attract, and 3-to-1 side slopes, turf grass, and a pond water surface elevation that rises and falls every time there's any rainfall, and may have, wind-driven wave action. I mean, this kind of shoreline is just all too common um, in New Jersey on these wet ponds and a lot of residential and commercial areas. And that can be, this is before and after photos here, what can be done there to not just improve water quality, but discourage that Canada geese issue to begin with. Looking beyond, again, beyond stormwater infrastructure, shoreline options, in-water opportunities. So on the right is some floating wetland islands added to an existing lake. And on the left, you see another typical Canada geese kind of problem. And that can be restabilized, revegetated. And these are before and after photos of that shoreline opportunity. So it's a retrofit. I know we're kind of stretching the concept of a stormwater retrofit here, but that's what we need to do. We need to be flexible, like I said before. Typically, you're going to have sites to choose from, again, because we have so much impervious cover. First places we look, if we're working with a community, are those open space, public spaces where you also get the added benefit of the demonstration and education that can be tied into it. But there does come a point where you do need professional assistance if you're modifying a drainage system or something like that, especially if it's again a system that was already designed with some performance in mind. So I know Aaron's going to touch on this too, but what are the issues you're looking to address? Is there an acute flooding issue? What is your main objective? I gave you 6 to choose from before, and that list isn't finite. And also I say here, look beyond the outfall itself. What's the drainage area? Are you really getting the biggest bang for your buck, or do you have a place that's really concentrating a lot of stormwater runoff? Is the pavement a high traffic area, or is it something that really doesn't get any vehicular traffic to begin with? So you kind of got to look at all the different pieces to the puzzle when you compare and weigh your options. So what to look out for, what gets in the way, in the built environment, utility conflicts are everywhere. Moving a lot of earthwork or exporting or importing soil is a big cost killer. So if you're trying to, expand a floodplain or expand an existing basin, and actually do some earthwork, some cut to maybe tackle some additional flood mitigation, that's great, and you should do that. But if you have a place on site where you can place that in a way that doesn't impact any regulated areas or any other issue, that's going to really save on costs. As soon as you start loading material on trucks and moving it around, you're going to be hitting the wallet pretty hard. Have realistic expectations and look out for unintended consequences and things like that. The more developed a landscape, the more difficult this is. So to wrap up, most of the main O&M considerations revolve around the vegetation. Is it going to be more of a manicured approach, or is it just, what's the mowing frequency? What's your tolerance for invasives? Finally, one lesson learned here. Yes, this outlet structure is painted green. I guess that's another definition of green infrastructure. But the point of this photo here is that although this is a naturalized basin, this photo was taken just after a large storm event. You can see the rack on top of the outlet structure. mowing around that outlet structure is key. You can't maintain what you can't see. And generally, mowed edges show intent, and I think on the average person show that that intent and improve the overall aesthetics or the likelihood of that kind of system being accepted. So again, you already have this link. If you missed it the first time Chris showed it, there it is again. And we look forward to questions at the end. And I'm going to hand this over to Aaron in just a moment.
Great, thanks, Clay. Let me just get set up here. Right, I think we're up and rolling here. So yeah, thank you, Watershed Institute for having us, and thanks to Clay and Chris for that great introduction and for having me on your presentation team today. But yeah, my name's Erin Bennett. I'm Proposal and Marketing Manager at Princeton Hydro. And a quick background too, I, in a previous role, worked in Baltimore with residents and places of worship to help them implement or install small-scale green infrastructure projects. So some of what I'm speaking about today is from that experience, but also, you know, my experience in my current role at Princeton Hydro and what I've learned, you know, in my experience. So yeah. All right, so you know, Chris and Clay really set up my presentation well with the background information with you know, the stormwater management in New Jersey, what that looks like, what the issues are. Clay provided some great examples of stormwater retrofits and talked about the guide. And following that technical information, I'm going to be kind of looking at you know, stormwater retrofits, green infrastructure projects through the lens of partnerships and collaboration and stakeholder involvement. So there will probably be some overlap a bit from some of Clay's slides, but I'll be looking at it from more of the social aspect, I'll call it. So yeah, and then some of the items that I hope to address and kind of give that partnership, apply that partnership lens to would be project identification. How do you establish goals for a project? What are the opportunities with maintenance, as well as what are some education opportunities? And I do want to throw out there too that, you know, following up with what Clay talked about with the different types of retrofits, inherently, you know, some project types will have more opportunities for stakeholder involvement and for partnerships than others. So kind of talking about this in a general sense, but with the understanding that, you know, every project is different, every opportunity is different. Yeah, so let's see here. Next slide. So I guess first, you know, what do I mean by partnerships? The word is thrown around a lot, and you see it as a priority in a lot of different for a lot of different projects. For me and how I'm presenting it today, I'm looking at the definition as like a team of individuals, of people working together to ID, to design, install, or construct, fund, and also maintain a stormwater BMP or retrofit. So some of the folks that I've listed here, so community members, property owners, landowners, business owners, community groups, government agencies, technical experts, funders. I think these are kind of typical partnerships, and I think that you may have heard the term like non-traditional partnerships. I know I have quite a bit when it comes to who can we engage with that we don't typically or automatically think of when we think about a green infrastructure project. So I listed places of worship here because that's what my background was. But you know, who's missing from this list? This list, I'm sure, can be extremely extensive. So I'd be curious if people want to put in the Q&A, some groups that aren't listed here that you've had a really positive experience working with, who you've brought to the table, because I think sometimes that outside of the box thinking of who to bring in is critical to project success. So for project identification, and Clay talked about the technical considerations, and these are very important, right? So for the stormwater retrofit to function, for the green infrastructure project to function, we need to consider the technical components, because at the end of the day, if it's not functioning the way it needs to be, it's not a success, right? But looking at it from that stakeholder engagement partnership perspective, what other questions should we be asking when we're trying to identify potential projects? So these are some questions, but like I said, I would love to see folks' feedback in the Q&A if there are some things that I missed. But so who uses the space, and how do they use the space? And what would, if say a green infrastructure project were constructed, what would the impact of that space be from like a social standpoint? So, do people have projects in mind? Like, some people might think I'd always love to see like a soccer field in that space, or, I'd always love to see a flower garden. So if the project were to go ahead, how would people feel about that? And could the project be used in the future for education or for community involvement? Is there potential there? So just kind of thinking of these questions, and trying to get answers, right? Is really how we apply that people component, or that stakeholder lens to this identification part of projects. So like I said, if there's any other questions that folks think of or that they ask when it comes to IDing projects, be happy to see them in the Q&A. So how do we answer these questions? So we bring folks to the table and we try to gather input, and we bring in groups or folks that we might not be like the low-hanging fruit. I know that term's been used already, but might not be the low-hanging fruit, or the people that we typically include. And might be thinking, well, if there's more people involved and there are more ideas being shared, that equals more challenges. And at first, when I was making the slide, I put, well, maybe, but in reality, I think it's more of a probably. So there's probably going to be challenges, the more opinions and the more thoughts. But I think in the end, what happens is you end up with a more successful project all around. So from a technical standpoint, but also from a community standpoint. And you can tell I'm not a mathematician. My equation there has 2 equal signs instead of pluses and minuses, but you have to forgive me for that. Okay, so Clay touched on project goals. So he mentioned water quality and flood reduction and hydrologic improvements, as well as decreasing operation and maintenance costs, and also ecological uplift. And there's definitely an opportunity to look at those, not just from the technical part of those goals, but looking at it more from the people part, and how we can incorporate different thoughts, different opinions, different goals. So, for example, water quality. Could there be a volunteer program where volunteers go out and monitor water quality? There could be. When it comes to like operation and maintenance costs, is there opportunity to bring in members of the public to learn about what's a native plant and to help with some of the removing of non-desirable species? So things like that. But so in addition to those technical goals, we have it could be improving aesthetics. So if there's what people view as an eyesore or a unused, say, piece of turf grass area, people might just want to see some native plants or some flowers. Or and I think I think a very meaningful, and Clay did touch on this, a meaningful goal could be a demonstration project. So showing people what is possible. So demonstrating that you may have heard of a rain garden. Well, this is what it looks like. These are the types of flowers that are in it. These are types of plants that are in it. This is how it functions. You see when it rains, hey, it fills up, but it does soak into the ground. You don't have standing water for 2 weeks, that kind of thing. So I think demonstration as a goal could be, or typically is a very good goal and very meaningful, because I think it has a lot of impacts socially. So also education. There could be extensive education goals. Could be teaching people about stormwater, teaching people about what are some solutions, teaching people about native plant identification and why native plants are important, things like that. And honestly, I think we could have entire days worth of presentations about environmental education. But I do feel like that's that should be or can be and should be a goal in and of itself. So I wanted to talk about how a goal might not be, say, an end goal, but a goal of the entire process of implementing or constructing a stormwater BMP. Just having folks involved throughout the process could be the goal, right? Could be a goal. So incorporating the new ideas, bringing new people and new groups to, I keep saying to the table, but incorporating those new ideas, because you may encounter, and you probably will encounter, some preconceived notions about environmental issues in general, about stormwater, about maybe specific best management practices. I encountered this a lot with rain barrels and cisterns in Baltimore. I think having people involved from day one is important. And a few of my slides will have listening and building trust as a, I include that on a few slides. And that's because listening is such an important part of partnerships and of engagement and of bringing in new people. Because sometimes I think, folks, they want to know that they're being listened to. They don't want to feel as though, oh, we're reaching out to you so that we can check this stakeholder engagement box, right? So, and I think by truly listening and by following up with people with answers to questions we might not have right away, or directing them to resources, and building that trust is really critical to a successful project when you look at it from kind of this more holistic, in a holistic sense. So project success. So when you have these new ideas and new people involved from the beginning, and you have different perspectives, I think it leads to project success, because you might be addressing potential challenges from the beginning. Any like pushback or any, we'll call them the glass half empty folks, right, with opinions. If you're kind of addressing that from the beginning, I think it does lead to just overall success, because, you won't be bogged down by, oh, like, shoot, we haven't thought of that, or the project's practically constructed, or project's practically identified and a grant applied for, and now we have to rethink something. So I think it's definitely critical to project success. And also funders like to see partnerships. So I know, I think it's the next session this afternoon, we'll talk about funding and all those opportunities. So I'm definitely not going to go into this in too much detail, but there's a reason why funders like to see partnerships, and it's because they really truly are critical to success. All right, so project maintenance, really quickly. So I don't want to get into this in too much detail, but some things to think about, and as you're bringing the new people in, and bringing the groups in, and incorporating everyone's feedback and all of that, what type of maintenance will be required, who could potentially perform it, Is there an opportunity for education, an opportunity, say, for volunteers or for education and trainings? And cost savings is I think a driver for sure for people, and those volunteers or those trainings could be an opportunity to save some money there. And by having an effective and a planned out maintenance plan and defined roles of who's going to be doing what, and say incorporating those volunteers, you can really set yourself up for success, not just for that project, but for future opportunities. Because if it's a very, say, highly visible project outside of a library, something like that, and people walk by it all the time and they see, oh, wow, that always looks really nice. I wonder if we could do that like in the park or something like that. So, having successful maintenance plan even from a non-functioning standpoint, but more of the visibility standpoint, is very important. So yeah, so I could definitely have an entire day of engagement and how to get those folks to the table, and how to get people's feedback and get new people involved. But some things like flyers, social media, attending like something like an HOA meeting or a community meeting, and at that meeting having people there to answer questions is very important. You could also dive into this significantly more by conducting like community-based participatory research, which is things like issuing surveys and doing focus groups and really learning about what people's attitudes are about various things, about environmental issues, about specifically stormwater, gauging people's knowledge, as well as what are people's perceived, what are the perceived benefits of say a rain garden or a retrofit, and what do people perceive as negatives, or what are some of the barriers. So you could definitely dive into this a lot more. You could definitely have a very extensive engagement program. But again, I would put in here listening, not just talking. So even in just the everyday engagement, handing out a flyer or that kind of thing, just listening to what people are saying, and not just automatically assuming that they want to see whatever it is that we're proposing, right? So addressing some challenges, right? So managing expectations is a big one. One thing that I've encountered in the past, people, for example, for a place of worship that I worked with, they weren't quite sure what to expect from like a timeline standpoint. So from project ID to the actual construction, it can take a while, especially you're applying for grant funding and you're waiting for grant cycles to open up, things like that. So just from the beginning, like kind of putting it all on the table, being very upfront, very important, and having the right partners, the right folks in those conversations. So whether it's the funders themselves or government agencies or things like that, that really, by having those lines of communication open from the beginning, can help with managing those expectations. Lack of knowledge, of course, could be a challenge. A church that I worked with in Baltimore, one lady, one time after one of our meetings discussing the project, asked, well, can I have an evergreen tree, or not an evergreen tree, but a tree that doesn't lose its leaves? And I'm thinking, well, I'm thinking in my head, like, I don't really know what you're asking, what you mean. Well, it turned out like she wanted some trees, or she wanted some shrubbery that didn't lose its leaves in the winter. It's like, well, why, like, what's the barrier there? Like, what's the problem? It just turned out that she was just worried about, the leaves gathering in the rain garden, things like that. So when you really like dove down to what the concern was, it just turned out that she was worried about leaves. So yeah, that can be, that could be an issue if folks don't quite understand how things work. But that's where we come in and help with education. So even with an extensive engagement program, you probably won't reach everyone, either like physically won't be able to reach everyone, or may not, the importance of a project may not sink into people. You know, like I think I mentioned the glass like half full or half empty folks. You know, there's always going to be the naysayers, and all we can do is keep that communication open, answer questions. You're right, you're not gonna please everyone. Like I say, everyone can't get everything. Compromise is needed. So at the end of the day, these projects, they need to function. They need to be technically sound and work. So there are things that we can't compromise on. But if there are some areas, you know, maybe we can listen and do our best to make sure that people feel heard. Okay, so you're probably thinking like, okay, engagement, stakeholder involvement, community involvement, sounds like a lot of work, sounds like a lot of effort. And it is, it is. And it can be, and you might also be thinking like, sounds expensive too. If we're having folks, whether it's, if you're with a nonprofit, you're having folks go out and do that research or go out and do that engagement, or from a municipality where, you know, it takes time. So don't want to talk about grant funding too much, like I said, because the next session we'll talk about those opportunities. But I just wanted to say that when it comes to looking for funding, say from a grant program, knowing that every project has a story. So incorporating all of that feedback that you've gained through the project, the planning process, and incorporating that into a grant application, and really describing what the impact from a say water quality standpoint, but also from a, this is the impact it will have on the community, from a you know, education standpoint, or that kind of thing. You know, that story being told is very important. Grantors like project partners and match. So having, you know, they like to see that you've thought of who you might bring to the table, or who you already have brought to the table, as well as, all right, what can those folks provide? You know, like I keep mentioning volunteers, but volunteers, or you know, someone providing equipment or that kind of thing. And then maintenance plan and responsibilities, as we all know, you know, the project isn't quote unquote finished once it's constructed. Maintenance is involved, and it's critical to success of the project. So, you know, funders certainly like to see that, and incorporating you know, different opportunities for partner involvement there is great. And then, you know, how will the community be engaged? Are there education opportunities? A lot of times for grants, the overall project success, and some of the metrics that we use to measure that success are things like the number of people involved, or number of people reached, or number of trainings held, or did folks change their knowledge, or did folks change their opinions about projects. So kind of answering that question and describing that in grant application is great. So I'm revisiting my bad math equation here with the 2 equal signs, but more people involved equals more ideas, more success, maybe, but I'm going to say yes. And I think a lot of people would say yes. So that's all I have. And there's my contact information and everything like that. But yeah, I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Erin and Chris and Clay. Great presentations. There's been a bunch of questions. Some of them have been answered, but I'm going to go back to some of them. So one person talked about, I teach high school. Would it be possible to learn how to have high school students analyze the stormwater runoff functionality in a town and perhaps advocate for retrofits? Sean, great question. And I will just encourage you, tomorrow we added an education track. Not something we've done normally in the Watershed Conference, and there's a session empowering students to be local stewards. That's at 1:15, and we have our Stream Watch Schools coordinator, Davis Bush, talking about our Stream Watch Schools program, teaching students and teachers on how to look at water quality and stream health. I will also note we do a community watershed advocacy program that is open for adults as well as high school students, usually in the fall, and there's some opportunities with that one. So, you know, stay, please come tomorrow. And we also have for that empowering students session, Unity Charter School talking about their empowering students program. So I just wanted to point that out very quickly. And then Councilwoman Mandel talked about, can you speak to the maintenance of stormwater landscapes? We have added several, and it's becoming an issue to fit into our normal public works maintenance. So again, Councilwoman, great question. And not ironically, we have a whole session on about creating successful plant establishment and rain gardens. How New York City actually put together their green infrastructure program so that it actually can be maintained. So that is tomorrow morning at 10:45. And so with that question, I don't know if any of the panelists had any additional thoughts with that.
Yes, on the maintenance, Mike.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it really, and there was another comment that I tried to respond to earlier. It's different. So if your maintenance crew is used to, and they probably are, to mowing, once a week during the growing season, then this is a change. So I think there has to be some training. When we do a retrofit, we typically also develop an O&M manual, like how to keep this thing functional. And so instead of mowing, some of the new skills that people may need to learn are, things like invasive species identification. And you may be going from a mowing, again, once a week during the growing season to just monitoring it once a year, removing woody vegetation if it's not desired, and learning to identify and tackle invasives, especially in those early years before things get established. If you're talking about a more green infrastructure approach, so it's a new skill set. I'm not sure that it's more labor intensive. In fact, in many cases, it's less. I mean, you can just do the math on the mowing if you're converting mowed areas, but I think it's more just a new skill set.
Yeah, and I'll also add the moderator for the On the Hook for Maintenance, Corey Dudash, who's our Conservation Sustainability Director, had always talked about when you design these bioretention systems, some of the plant mixes, you'll see 50 or 60, and I'm probably exaggerating, different types of plants.
Yeah.
Minimizing the number of plants so that you can actually identify what you have there and can figure out what is invasive or what is not desired. She's always been a big proponent of that.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So
Yeah, sometimes designers like that shotgun approach, and if give everything an opportunity, we'll see what takes, but that does make it harder from the operation and maintenance standpoint.
Yeah, and there was a related question, Clay. I think you answered it, but on maintenance, do you have a comparison rate, hours, tools, training, and qualifications?
No, I don't have a. I think it's very specific to the retrofit. With some things, with the more engineered manufactured treatment devices, you can, okay, maybe this thing will need to be cleaned out twice a year. What does that cost? And you can put a number on it. I think that in a more green infrastructure type approach, there needs to be more monitoring and probably less actual maintenance, because the monitoring is what is going to identify the beginnings of a problem before the problem develops. And so, spending a little more money or focus on the observation or the monitoring, the frequency of that, especially in those first few growing seasons, is going to be time and money well spent, in comparison to, trying to resolve an issue, whatever it be, whether it's an erosional feature or I keep using the invasive plant reference. Either one of those, early identification is key. So the education and the monitoring, um, if that's done properly, I think the maintenance can even be can be reduced compared to you know, pre retrofit system.
Great, thank you. Again, this question has been asked and answered. Chris gave a really good answer, but I want to put this out there. Does New Jersey view stream restoration, bank stabilization, riparian zone implementation as a viable stormwater retrofit BMP? Are there opportunities to take a holistic watershed approach to address water quality and flood resiliency? I'll throw that out to the three of you before I give my half a cent.
Yeah, Mike's favorite topic of all time. Yeah, this is a great question. The most recent MS4 permit in 2023 was probably the largest update in a long time. Formerly, there would be two tiers of MS4 permits for municipalities. There would be tier A for larger municipalities and tier B for smaller municipalities. As of 2023, every single municipality in the state, all 564 of them, are now tier A and must comply with the kind of more stringent requirements for tier A permits. And it really marks a shift toward regional watershed planning with these watershed improvement plans because they're requiring projects at every single municipality, no matter where you are in the watershed. And it's an unfortunate reality that the inaction of upstream communities usually sets the stage for water quality impairments and flooding concerns that are most felt by downstream residents. So a downstream municipality can do everything right. They can have green infrastructure all over the town. But if the upstream municipalities are not pulling their weight as well, um, you know, there's really nothing that the downstream town can do about it. They might just experience terrible flooding, which is the case for a lot of towns throughout the state. So we really can't operate as 564 separate systems. So although the watershed improvement plans and the MS4 permit are not directly requiring regional cooperation, it makes a lot of sense for municipalities to work together when drafting these plans. It saves a lot of time, a lot of money. There's a lot of crossover between the data. So there is heavy guidance and emphasis on working together to complete these plans. And it is something that a lot of towns throughout the state are actively working on to complete these plans by 2027. So, Mike, I'm sure you have some more thoughts on that.
No, I'll throw it to Clay or Aaron as well, if you all have thoughts.
No, I couldn't say any better. I think we need to start looking beyond, you know, beyond the BMP manual, if you will, in a state that's built out the way New Jersey is with the impacts we have downstream communities that Chris was talking about. We obviously, um, we've got to go beyond the BMP manual and think about improving our natural systems to provide the services that we need and yeah, working together collaboratively with upstream and downstream communities is going to be the only way to you know, if we want to go beyond just, you know, putting in a rain garden somewhere and look at taking bigger bites of the apple, that's what's going to have to happen. And we need it. We need it.
Absolutely. And so I will add, and I put it in the chat. So there's a session tomorrow on a case study for a regional watershed improvement plan, how that is going. We did a session on that last year. Also, Princeton Hydro and the Watershed Institute started a restoration academy so that, you know, we have professionals that understand those concepts are ready and able to help design restoration as part of our watershed improvement plans versus everyone getting a rain garden. So, all right, a couple more questions. What can DEP do to expedite, reduce permitting requirements for organizations that are doing environmentally beneficial projects? We probably all have thoughts, but I will say the plenary session is tomorrow morning with various DEP leaders. So we have Watershed and Land Management, Water Resources, Green Acres, or Nick Angarone from Climate Change. So I think that's a great question for them. Everyone is giving great questions for tomorrow's sessions. So I probably could not have planned that better. And then I'm not sure if there's any other questions that either haven't been answered or we should spend a second talking about. Yeah, so I think with that, let me just bring my screen back up. And so this is the end of our session for this morning. We have a lunch break. Yep, so we have a lunch break. The next session starts at 1 o'clock. Again, everything you want to know about this conference could be on Zoom events. If you want CEU forms, and I do have one announcement, we did find out that our CFM credits were denied for this session, so we can't provide those. So apologies for that, but we just found that out this morning. And then if you have any questions, obviously, please reach out to us. And again, the next session starts at 1 o'clock. Everyone have a great lunch. And again, I appreciate everyone spending their time. Aaron, Chris, Clay, thank you very much for spending your time with us today, your expertise. And I look forward to seeing everyone this afternoon. So thank you very much.